Welcome to another Ask Katrina. The question for today's video blog is this. Hey Katrina, I've been given additional responsibilities in my role, and I want to go ask for more money for the higher level of responsibility. How do I negotiate that? We have all been in this situation where we know we are doing more and we deserve an increase in pay for it. The first thing I want to say is congratulations on actually acknowledging that and not waiting for it to be recognized by others. That is one of the most common things that happen and one of the most common barriers to success in the careers of corporate executive women. It is that we expect other people to see our high performance and acknowledge it and reward us for it. And that's just not how the world works, right? It is sometimes in a very, very large machine that has routines and things in place. You will eventually be acknowledged and rewarded because you'll be compared to your peers. But the reality is that if you have been given responsibilities mid-swing and nobody's keeping an eye on it, they're not going to pay you more because why would they? You haven't asked for it. You haven't set the bar that that's an expectation that you have. And so you're saying it's okay to keep going at the pace and the path. And so they're going to be okay with that. You have to be the one that asks for the change. You must ask for something different. Okay. So I'm proud of you for acknowledging the fact that you're going to have to ask for it. That's step number one, acknowledging that you've got to go have the conversation. Step number two, and what I typically recommend is this. What were you doing prior to? What are they asking you to do now? Make a list of all the things you're being asked to do in addition to your current job description. Okay. What's new? How much of a lift is it? Right? Is it a lot more direct reports? Is it a lot more projects? What's the workload? Is it a temporary assignment or a permanent addition to your responsibilities? All those things matter. But I want you to be able to lay out and understand the amount of influence you're now going to have over the business because of these new functions that have been added to your plate of responsibility. All right? Understand. Step two is to then go and be prepared to have a conversation, typically with your direct supervisor. Sometimes this can happen with HR. It depends on your structure, okay? But at the end of the day, you've got to find the right person to have this discussion with, and you're going to have a conversation along the lines of, hey, I know that we've had this discussion about additional responsibility. I want to understand the amount of compensation that's going to occur because of this additional responsibility. Ultimately, what you're asking me to do was a job that 1.5 people were doing. The functions that I'm responsible for and have been responsible for haven't changed, and nothing has been eliminated. Are we eliminating something, or is this a full app? Because that's a fair question, right? I mean, we're thinking right now that you're keeping everything and you're being added to. It could be that you're getting rid of some things that aren't working, projects, arms of the business that are dying, and they're bringing this over. If that's the case and there's not a whole lot more and it's pretty equal, it's equal. Still have the conversation. I'm not telling you not to have the conversation. If you believe that you deserve more in compensation, always go have the conversation. The answer is already no. So it's not going to hurt you to go have the discussion. Okay? Find out, what are we keeping? What are we adding? What are we eliminating? If it's definitely a lift, we've got to have that conversation to say, hey, this is additive to my responsibility. This means you're updating my job description. What's the new pay band going to be for this new role? It's usually how I ask it, right? What's the new pay band and what's the median for the pay for this role? Doesn't mean I'm asking for an increase. I'm just asking to understand how they're going to change the role in general, right? I'm not speaking person to person. I'm talking about the role. It's not a person. It's an entity, essentially. That's much safer for people to discuss. You may feel more comfortable having the discussion in that regard. If that feels comfortable to you, approach it that way. Kick off the conversation that way, right? The other thing I want you to do before you go sit down in that conversation is I want you to do a little bit of market research. Maybe your title hasn't changed, but it's going to. Maybe they're asking you to update the title. I don't know, right? But we know that most very large organizations tend to have typical similar titles as other organizations because we all have to speak the same language, right? When I'm trying to hire someone to fill a role, I've got to be able to look at their resume and understand the role that they've held prior to confirm that it aligns with the role I want to put them in. That's why we all have to have similar language in our job titles, right? So it has to happen. So go look for similar jobs and seek to understand the pay that's happening out in the rest of the world. Such that when you ask and have the conversation, what's the pay band and what's the median going to be for that pay band? And they tell you, you can say, that's pretty interesting. That's actually a little bit lower than my research showed for the rest of the industry. Or, that's pretty good. That's actually in line with what I've researched with the rest of the industry. Whatever the truth is, you call that out. In other words, you tell them that you've done your research and you're fully aware. That's just being a responsible employee. That's responsibly stepping into the role. There's nothing wrong with doing research. I'm proud of you for doing it. I would be proud of you if you came to me and told me that. You would probably be proud as well. Because you're not challenging somebody. You're just saying, hey, that sounds pretty spot on, right? Or that sounds a little low. We might need to look into this. Let me share some of the things I've come across, right? You're being helpful. After you have the conversation relative to the pay band discussion, you're going to say, hey, based on the information you just gave me, I'm sitting lower than the median for the pay band. Or, what you just shared with me is lower than the research, and I'm actually lower than that. Or I'm sitting at the median that you described, but that median is actually lower than the industry standard. And so I just want to share all this with you. I do think that we need to make some adjustments for the pay band, or, hey, the pay band sounds great, but I'm low. Let's get me to the median. And so that's how you can ask to have your compensation adjusted without saying, well, but I deserve it because you've given me more. That doesn't really have a leg to stand on. You're approaching it from a very thoughtful perspective. What's the pay band going to be, right? It's not emotional. It's what the company decides. What's the pay band going to be? Here's what the market research shows. Here's where I sit relative to that. How are we going to put all this stuff together? It's really the framework of the conversation, okay? That is how you approach a negotiation with salary. Now, if they come back and say, yeah, I know you're lower than, but we're not going to bump you up, then you can get into discussions to seek to understand why. Hey, I fully understand that that's your answer. Help me understand the thought process behind that so that I can be on the same page. Help me align with that perspective. And all you're trying to do is get them to tell you why that's their answer. So then you can come back and say, I hear what you're saying. I'm going to actually ask that you reconsider because I'm not growing into this role. I'm already accepting this responsibility day one. So I'm already doing extra without being compensated for extra. And we have a culture of always being fair to everyone. And we want to be consistently fair. So wouldn't you think it would be fair to go ahead and compensate me for this additional responsibility? And they're probably going to say yes, right? Especially if you tie it back to your core values. So it's all about having the discussion, not about me and my feelings and blah, 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 but the company and how the company runs and the core values of the company and how we just typically do things that's right for the team and the members of the company itself. So that's it. There's no emotion. It's just common sense. It's the way you're describing it. It's just the way you're bringing it forward. So there's no reason why they wouldn't agree with you because it's so logical and it's done without emotion that they're like, oh, yeah, well, that makes perfect sense. Okay. Try it. I'd love to hear how it goes if you try it. I know it's going to be great. I've coached a lot of women on it. So try it.